over the past 3 days, we have seen, perhaps emboldened by the fact that Chuck Schumer capitulated in this fight with Trump. I mean, it would have been a lot harder politically to justify what is going on with immigration over the past 3 days and immigrants if people were afraid of losing fundamental essential services, but still essentially, in some instances, torturing, rendering green card holders, etc., had gone on. This is a video of a rapid response video of supposed Venezuelan gang members being deported and imprisoned in El Salvador.
This was tweeted out by the Trump, like their Truth Social, but also their White House account, which is this Rapid Response 47 thing that tweets out basically state propaganda for Donald Trump.
Now understand, these people were sent to El Salvador in 3 planes that while they were in the air, and it has now been shown by flight records, that they defied a court order. A judge had specifically said, a Judge Boasberg had issued an order. I've lost it here now.
Essentially, if you want me to fill in the gaps
Please.
here, Trump signed this order on Friday, and it was kept very quiet because they wanted to get the logistics in place to transport these around 250 Venezuelan immigrant men to El Salvador, where Bukele is notorious for essentially prison labor, putting their prisoners to work for no pay and extraordinarily harsh conditions. So even Guantanamo Bay, it appears, was a little bit too close to the eye of the public for Donald Trump. He prefers to outsource the detention of these people to an alt-right maniac in El Salvador.
The worst part about this, though, is, in addition, obviously, if you're one of those people, that the plane bringing these was ordered halted, and the Trump administration ignored it.
Yeah.
And then later claimed it was already over
international
waters, and therefore a judge's requirement of the U.S. government has no effect, which of course is, I mean, contemplate what the implications of that, if that were true, and no one thinks it's true. It would mean that anytime, I mean,
that Trump's in Air Force One, say a judge's order doesn't apply to him.
Or a military personnel is, deployed, or somebody's on a cruise liner. It's absurd. National Security Attorney Mark Zaid wrote on X, court order defied. First of as many I've been warming and start of a true constitutional crisis. White House said this is headed to the Supreme Court and we're going to win.
Well, we can get to why maybe he's right in just a second, but do you want to play this? This is basically propaganda. And they show, I don't know if we see this part, but they show them shaving the heads of these men. Here you go. So this is footage of a
Again, this is,
bus.
Leni Riefenstahl made this footage. This is Trump's propaganda team.
Yep. And the Truth says these are the monsters sent into our country by crooked Joe Biden. Here you go. And then you can see this.
Radical left Democrats.
Always a...
These prison guards have their whole faces covered.
Yeah, why are their faces covered?
I mean, I'm sorry, but shaving people's body hair, this evokes some of the worst instances of genocide, of human rights abuses in our history. They're claiming that these men are Tren de Aragua, a gang, which Trump immediately classified when coming, this footage, immediately classified as a terrorist organization when coming into office. But there's been at least one lawyer who's raised the alarm of one of these men who was transferred there, who says, actually, he was seeking asylum. My client, I think are we good on this?
Yeah.
Seeking asylum, my client, because he was an LGBTQ person in Venezuela and was a tattoo artist. So he had a bunch of tattoos on him. And the Trump administration is reportedly claiming that because of these tattoos, that he is a part of this prison gang. But he was supposed to have a hearing on Monday, one of these men, with proof that he was not a part of Tren de Aragua. And it's an interesting piece. It's an interesting, it's interesting timing that the Trump administration did this when they did it.
Again, this is the administration is, and as you can see, do we have this up? The judge, Boasberg, ordered deportation flights carrying these alleged Venezuelan gang members to return to the U.S. and blocking Trump from invoking the Alien Enemies Act. What is the Alien Enemies Act? It is an act, and we mentioned this earlier, I guess last week, from 1798.
But it was first used in the War of 1812.
It was used in the War of 1812, and then it was used again in World War I, and then in World War II. Now, those are the only 3 times it's been used. Do you see the pattern? The War of 1812, World War I, and World War II.
And in World War II, it was used to detain and intern Japanese Americans.
Yes, to put them in concentration camps.
Yeah, it was horrible.
But the invocation of this act, again, War of 1812, World War I, World War II. And it has not been invoked since then, or prior to those times. It is, again, only used in those instances in rather horrible ways. According to the statute, the president may invoke the Alien Enemies Acts in times of declared war or when the foreign government threatens or undertakes an invasion, that's a quote, or predatory incursion against U.S. territory. In the War of 1812, the idea of predatory incursion was a fear of essentially, sleeper cells.
The French.
French.
The Federalists were concerned about the French.
Now, let's remember when it wasn't invoked. In the wake of 9/11, when there was a lot of talk of sleeper cells in the United States, because we had just seen so-called sleeper cell actually engage in a series of massive terrorist attacks against the country. So you may be asking yourself, why does he get to invoke this? And that's also what a bunch of lawyers are asking. The problem is that our law is only as ensconced as the particular court that they go to decides it will be. And at the Supreme Court, the president is counting on the idea of the Supreme Court essentially saying, we will not get involved in this because of the doctrine of political questions. This is essentially the political question doctrine essentially allows the Supreme Court to avoid addressing things when they don't want to.
Right.
And the problem is that there is no criteria that is any more specific than the idea of an incursion that is predatory. You will note that over the past several years, we have seen right-wingers, we have seen the president of the United States, we have seen conservatives, we've seen even some wayward former progressive shows and media outlets claim that we are being invaded by immigrants. Now, no matter how you define that, pull up that graph I just sent in the IM. It's surrounded by, it's right, the last thing I sent in the IM. This is from these hippies over at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
Ugh, so much wokeness in our government. How can we
Yes.
get that out?
Southwest land border encounters. Because oddly, we don't hear how we're being invaded by the Canadians. But look at the scroll down to this graph here. You will notice there are different color-coded lines here. And we have 2025 is that red line that's down at the bottom. That is dramatically lower than any of the other lines, which are in the past 3 years. In terms of the annual, or I should say, Southwest land border encounters by month.
And a continuation of 2024, I would point out.
Exactly. In 2024, at no point, except for I think like briefly at the beginning of, or I should say at the end, somehow that says December, but that's got to be December 2025. Oh, fiscal year.
They're looking at.
So that's the end of, these are fiscal years.
Yep.
That's the end of 2023. But even if you were to go back, but regardless, the point is that right now, in 2025, and in the last 7-8 months of 2024, the land border encounters by month in the Southwest have been dramatically lower than they had been prior. I don't know how you justify an invasion or a predatory incursion when there are 12,000 border incursions or encounters.
Right.
A tenth what there had been previously.
A tenth of what there had been.
But the problem with this statute is that it's particularly vague, right? So like, because it was, it's a late, 1700 statute. The Brennan Center for Justice writes that the term invasion is used literally, typically referring to large-scale attacks. The term predatory incursion is also used in writings of that period to refer to slightly smaller attacks like the 1781 raid on Richmond led by American defector Benedict Arnold. Today, some anti-immigration politicians or groups urge a non-literal reading of invasion and predatory incursion so that the Alien Enemies Act can be invoked in response to unlawful migration, etc. So the question is, does the Supreme Court grant them, when this inevitably goes there, the broad definition of what an invasion and incursion is? And if they do that, that is such a terrifying precedent that gives the president basically broad powers under this authority to determine, I don't know, anything as a potential invasion or incursion based on his political enemies. And that's what the fear is the fact that this can really mean a lot under this definition. If those numbers constitute an invasion and incursion, there are many things that can.
Right. There's absolutely no limiting principle to this. If there's no criteria and land border encounters can be at a fraction. In December of 2023, there were 300,000. In February, there were 12,000. That's 1/30th.
Yeah.
Is my math right there?
I can't. I'm not the person
Sorry, what was
to say.
it? 12.
300. We're at 12,000 versus 300,000 in 2023. That is almost 1/30th. Maybe it's 1/26th. If that can be justified as reason for the Alien Enemies Act to be invoked, then there is no criteria for it.
A rational Supreme Court would respond with this by saying the statute, the Alien Enemies Act, is lawful, but you have to apply it in conjunction with Congress and the president, or Congress declaring war and us being in active wartime. That would be the kind of thing where, like, that would be a much more good faith reading of the statute. But I have no faith that the 6-3 Supreme Court is going to read it in that manner.
So we're now in that period where, and we have more to talk about this in a moment. We're going to do some sponsors first.
Can I just point out this tweet here that was by Nayib Bukele, where he quotes the New York Post saying feds judge orders deportation flights carrying alleged Venezuelan gangbangers. Nayib Bukele tweeted, "Oopsie, too late," crying, laughing face, and Marco Rubio retweeted that. So,
I mean,
Marco Rubio, he's the Secretary of State.
Yeah, Secretary of State, our lead diplomat.
it was probably the only adult in the room this time around, is what it's has been said, and that's the best case scenario for somebody to talk Trump off the ledge now.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.